Imagine this. You spend a full hour debating the craggy, windswept mountain pass to the left, or the dark, ominous forest path to the right. Your party's completely split. You argue about the resources, you check your rations, and after a tense vote, you finally pick the path to the left. It's a grueling journey. Halfway through, a massive manticore attacks, and you barely survive. Weeks later, you're chatting with your DM, and they casually say, "Yeah, good thing you didn't go right. The manticore would have gotten you in the woods." And that's when it hits you. That cold, sinking feeling. There was no choice. The manticore was always going to be there. Your debate, your vote, your agency, it was all an illusion. This is the design trap that is silently killing player investment at tables all across the world. It's baked into the very DNA of a lot of published adventures, and today, we're going to uncover why it happens and how you, the Dungeon Master, can break free and build stories from consequences, not from scripts. At its heart, the promise of Dungeons & Dragons is simple. Your choices matter. Player agency is the magic ingredient that says you can genuinely influence the story and the world with real, tangible consequences. It's what separates a collaborative story from a video game with better graphics. But modern D&D has a problem keeping that promise. Many adventurers, trying to deliver a big cinematic story, fall into the trap of creating an illusion of choice. This is where players see what looks like forks in the road, but every path is secretly built to lead to the exact same place. It's the quantum ogre. No matter which door you open, the same ogre is waiting for you. The first time this happens, your players might not notice. The second time, they might get suspicious. And by the third time, they know. And the moment your players realize their choices are meaningless, the game breaks. They stop being active participants and become passive spectators. They stop debating which path to go down because they know it doesn't matter. They stop making interesting, risky choices because the rails of the plot will just guide them back to where they were supposed to go in the first place. They become passengers. So why does this happen? Let's be fair, designing an adventure is hard, and published adventures are built to deliver a very specific, marketable experience. They sell you the epic war against dragons, the harrowing descent into the Nine Hells. They have to make sure you get to that experience, and the easiest way to do that is to build a one-way tunnel straight to the cool parts. A frequently cited example of this problem is 2022's Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. The pitch is huge. You're stepping into the legendary War of the Lance, right in the middle of a setting people have loved for decades. But as written, the adventure can quietly take agency away in order to keep you on its rails. Right from the jump, it assumes every character shares a connection to the same NPC, Ispin Greenshield, and it funnels the party to his funeral in Vogler. That's a perfectly fine hook for some tables, but it's also a very specific starting lane. You're not really choosing your first direction in the world. You're agreeing to the premise of the story so it can start moving. And as the campaign goes on, you can feel the hand of the steering wheel more and more. The book leans on the DM-facing guidance that basically says, nudge the party towards this conclusion, and it uses NPCs, especially Darrett, as a lever to point the characters to the next objective. The result, if you run it straight, is that the party can start to feel like they're being escorted from scene to scene instead of making the world move with their decisions. Even when you technically have choices, they can feel like choices inside of a narrow hallway. But the moment people point to the most is what happens in Calaman with Lord Soth. Soth is presented as a challenge rating 19 Death Knight, an arch-villain level threat, and the book has him infiltrate the city and murder the governor and the entire council while the characters are away. When the party returns, it's already done. The bodies are beyond the help of simple revivify, and the scene is written as aftermath, not as the crisis the players can interrupt. A world-shaking event happens, and the heroes of the story are forced to hear about it afterward. That's plot armor, but not for a character, for the plot itself. The narrative needs a certain outcome, so player action isn't allowed to interfere with it. And that's the exact pattern that trains players to stop taking initiative, because eventually, they learn the truth. The big stuff will happen whether they're there or not. This isn't unique to one book. Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus was similarly criticized for its linear opening, funneling players down a very specific path to make sure they get into Avernus, which is the adventure's main selling point. The destination is so prized that the journey becomes a formality, This style of design turns the DM from an impartial referee into a tour guide, pointing at scripted events as the cart moves along, and it robs the players of their victory or even the dignity of a meaningful defeat. If you've ever felt trapped on these rails as a player or a DM, hit that subscribe button. We're all about breaking free from the script, and I've put together a free downloadable PDF called The Player Agency Builder to help you do just that. The link is in the description. And let me know in the comments, what's the worst case of the illusion of choice you've ever experienced? So, what's the alternative? Total chaos? A completely unstructured sandbox where you have to improvise everything and prep for 1,000 possibilities? No. The solution isn't no prep, it's just smarter prep. The philosophical shift is this. Stop prepping plots and start prepping situations. Oh yeah. Your job is not to write a novel that your players act out. Your job is to create a corner of a living world, populated with interesting people who have their own goals, and then unleash the players to see what happens. The story is the result of the players interacting with the situation that you've created. It emerges from play. This is the core of the old school playstyle that values sandbox exploration, which I know isn't everyone's cup of tea, but may I say it's a lesson some modern RPGs desperately need to relearn. So let's get practical. Instead of a linear flowchart that reads A leads to B leads to C, start thinking in webs. I call it consequence mapping. Take a classic scenario. The players need to get some damning evidence from a corrupt guard captain's office. A railroaded plot says the players have to find the key, wait for nightfall, and sneak in to steal the evidence. A situation-focused approach asks, what does the captain want and what are the players likely to try? The captain wants to keep his crimes secret. Players want the evidence. Now, let's map out what could happen. One option is bribery. The players might try to buy him off, and if it works, they get the evidence. Simple. But now they've created a greedy contact who knows they'll pay, and that can come back to haunt them when he shows up later asking for more, or selling them out to someone who has a better offer. If the bribe goes badly, it doesn't just not work, he can take the money as proof and throw them in jail for trying to bribe an officer, turning a small problem into a legal nightmare. Either way, you've just created 2 fresh story branches without writing a single plot beat. Another approach is intimidation. They could try to threaten him into handing over the evidence, and if that pressure lands, he might comply out of fear. The cost is that they've made a bitter enemy who now has a badge, a grudge, and patience, and he'll look for quieter ways to hurt him later. If the threat fails, it escalates fast because he doesn't have to fight fair. He can call the entire city watch, and suddenly what was supposed to be a simple retrieval becomes a public brawl, a pursuit through the streets, and maybe even a citywide manhunt. Then there's stealth, the classic route. If they pull it off, they get the evidence and slip away clean, and the captain might not even know who did it or why it happened. That's a win that keeps the heat low and the options open. But if they get caught, the consequences are immediate and lasting because they aren't just adventurers doing a job. They're branded as criminals, and every future interaction with the law, the guilds, and the streets changes shape overnight. None of these is the right answer. They're just choices, and every single choice, success or failure, creates a real consequence that changes the story. You didn't write a plot, you created a problem, and the story will be whatever the players do about it. Now, let's scale it up. How do you make the whole world feel this reactive? We can steal a great tool from Dungeon World called fronts. A front is basically a bundle of related dangers that all point in the same direction. An enemy faction, a conspiracy, a plague, an invading army. You define 2 parts. First is the impending doom, which is what happens if the players do nothing. If it's an invasion, maybe the doom is simple, the capital falls. Second, you write a few grim portents, which are the visible steps that lead to that doom. Scouts are spotted mapping the borderlands. Frontier villages burn and supply lines get cut. Then the main force shows up and the siege begins. Here's the important part. Those grim portents don't wait politely for the party. They advance on a timeline. If the players hear about scouts and decide to spend 2 weeks chasing a magic sword instead, they come back to smoke on the horizon. That choice mattered. The world moved without them. And that's the opposite of the Lord Soth problem, where something huge happens off screen and the players could never have interacted with it anyway. With fronts, the world changes because of what the players do, or what they ignore, and that's what makes it feel alive. So let's use that to repair the Dragonlance example. As written, Lord Soth's attack on Calaman and the murder of the council is basically a fixed cutscene. Instead, turn it into a situation that advances like a front. Call it Lord Soth's Shadow Offensive. The impending doom is that Calaman's leadership gets decapitated, throwing the city defense into chaos. Then you lay down grim portents as visible steps towards that doom. First, rumors of a deathly night haunting the roads outside of the city, with peasants disappearing. Next, a respected high-ranking guard is found dead in a way that clearly isn't normal. After that, a public assassination attempt hits a single isolated council member, something the city can't ignore and the players just can't shrug off. Now your job as a DM is simple. Introduce the signs and let the players choose what to do with them. If they chase the rumors, then they run into Soth's agents and start uncovering the shape of the plan. If they ignore it, the next portent lands and the situation escalates. When the guard is murdered, do they investigate or do they keep moving? When the assassination attempt happens, do they step in and protect the council member or let it slide? Once the players engage, the story becomes flexible. If they protect that first target, Soth's timetable gets disrupted. Maybe he's forced into a riskier play, like an open assault on the council chambers. Except this time it's not off screen, the party is there. They can prepare defenses, set traps, rally allies, or confront Soth's minions before he ever reaches the doors. The key is that the outcome isn't guaranteed anymore. The council can still die, but now it happens because the players failed to act, or acted too late, or made the wrong call. Or the players succeed, and they aren't hearing about a massacre after the fact. There's a reason it didn't happen. Either way, the result feels earned, and player agency is back where it belongs. Look, running Dungeons & Dragons isn't about being a perfect narrator for a story that's already written. The real magic happens in the spaces between what you plan and what your players do. It lives in the unexpected choices, the brilliant successes, and the catastrophic failures. So stop writing a script for your players. Instead, create a world that is waiting to be written for their actions. Don't protect your plot, let your players break it, bend it, and set it on fire. The story you discover together will be far more surprising, engaging, and, ultimately, more memorable than any story you could have planned alone. If this changed how you think about prep, hit that like button and be sure to download the free Player Agency Builder PDF from the description. Also, check out the video on your screen right now about building villains that actually react to your players. Now, go make some consequences.